Our second film of the year 1930 is none other than Robert Z. Leonard's The Divorcee. This groundbreaking film starring the mesmerizing Norma Shear delves into the complexities of marriage and infidelity with an unflinching boldness rarely seen in its time. The Divorcee challenges societal norms and showcases Shear's unforgettable performance, which earned her an Academy Award. Initially considered to be too wholesome for the role of Jerry Martin, Norma Shear set off to prove she could handle the film's daring themes. Competing with the likes of Greta Garbo and Harlow, Norma had to impress the producer of the film by doing a racy and daring photoshoot that ultimately convinced the producer that she was perfect for the part. That producer that needed convincing was none other than her husband at the time. So step into this pre-code Hollywood masterclass of a performance in a one-of-one film and be prepared to be captivated by a story of passion, heartbreak, and resilience that continues to resonate even today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Divorcee.
I don't doubt it. Once a woman throws down her fences...
Oh, pin it on a motto and hang it where Janice can see it.
Stop that.
Oh, loose women, great, but not in the home, eh, Ted?
Cut it, do you hear?
The looser they are, the more they get. The best in the world, no responsibility. Well, my dear, I'm going to find out how they do it. So look for me in the future where the primroses grow. And pack your man's pride with the rest. And from now on, you're the only man in the world that my door is closed to.
Take all the hurdles, see all the scenery, and listen to the band play. Will, we just watched The Divorcee. April 30th, 1930 was the release date. Tagline is, when a woman discovers that her husband has been unfaithful to her, she decides to respond to his infidelities in kind. Directed by Robert Z. Leonard. I think it's the first time we've heard his name. Distributed by MGM Studios. Runtime of an hour, 22 minutes. Chester Morris as Ted, and the great Norma Shear as Jerry. Will, welcome back, man. This is our second movie in 1930. Tell me your fill-in-the-blank word and your instant reactions to this piece of film. Or this piece of art.
Fill in the blank word is, I was kind of torn between two, but I'll go with introspective. I thought this was surprisingly smart. I thought it was trying to do a lot. Not everything worked, but a lot did. And it was really curious about the relationship between men's desires and women's desires, and how they're different in the world, and whether or not they should be. So I was pretty impressed with this. I also was super impressed with the two leads of the movie. I thought they both did a great job. One at being very likable and one being not so likable. They both played their roles beautifully, but you can kind of see, both are redeemable too. So there's just a lot that was going on here that I just thought ended up working in the end. So,
yeah, I'm always interested in these when we talk love stories on which side of, because you and I have kind of missed a little bit on the way we view these men. I wonder how we're going to look at Chester Morris, a.k.a. Ted, in this one as we get going. I like your word. Very good word. I'm going to give the word familiar. And familiar for me is just because of my own personal experiences in this life, right? And I'm looking at it through the themes of this movie, which is love is a huge theme. And love is a huge theme in my life. And is, shamelessly, I think the idea of love has been maybe, I don't know, for me personally, it was probably, it's hindered the way I've looked at realistic love. Okay. I'm kind of on a new journey, Will, when it comes to, love and relationships and the way they're supposed to actually be, because I was a big romantic up until, I still want to be, but I'm a little more realistic with what the expectations are out of a relationship. It took me a long time to get to this place because I kind of thought that everything was supposed to be this big, gigantic love all the time. And if you don't have that, what are you doing? So I'm on my own personal journey. So familiar is the word, right? Familiar. Yeah. I thought this movie was really well done. There's a lot of great things here. Smart was the word you used. Mature is another word that could be put in. Mm-hmm. I thought these are the upper elite socialites. So these are educated people, and they let each other be each other, right? No one's kind of restricting anybody here, especially like the women. in this movie. You know, there's a lot of women that are portrayed: Mary, Dorothy, Helen, Hannah, and then Jerry being the one that's at the forefront, and she gets to be unapologetically Jerry throughout this movie.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a quote in here that says, "How can someone be so small, be taller than all the buildings in New York?" And that's because they let her be her. So I really enjoyed this movie. There's a lot of things that we'll poke holes into, but yeah, I thought it was unapologetically great for these females to be, you know, who they get to be in this man-driven world in the 1930s.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I really think there's some very smart stuff going on, especially in those scenes where Jerry and Ted are trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen. And it's pretty subtle too. I don't think they're trying to slam anything in anybody's face. I think they're trying to kind of let you feel out how they're feeling. And this is one of the first times that we get to see the characters go through the experience together and not have stuff spoon fed to us, right, as the viewer. So I feel like the characters really were allowed to feel the things that were happening, and it was better for it because of that.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting that you say that is that there was kind of like moments where this movie let it breathe, right? We an event takes place or it's spoken about, and we know that it's taken place. For example, you know, we learn about Ted cheating, right? Then we
Right.
get the scene marinates. They, you know, before they kind of have their big backlash. I I love that because we haven't gotten so much of that. You know, we've needed a scene or two, you know, that's been missing in a lot of the films that we've watched.
Yeah.
In this particular one, I thought the pacing of this movie, right? Like I'm sitting here
Mhm.
looking at like when does Act One get done, and you could argue that Act One ends at like the fourth or fifth scene, like right after the wedding is Act One, right? And we get there so quickly. There's a pacing to this movie. We jump ahead 3 years, but I almost
Mhm.
think that you know, it's not one of those things where it's like, oh man, we're 3 years into this story already. We needed more. I think it's perfect, right? It fits to the title. It fits to what the story was. So for a pacing, I thought the pacing of the movie was great because it was quick. It's a runtime of an hour 22, but even within that, they still let things marinate.
Yeah, right. And this is one of the first ones where we actually know exactly what the timelines are, right? Too, like they actually do a good job of letting us know without being like, slapping 3 years right on the screen, like 3 years later. So they give us what we need to kind of like situate ourselves without like thinking about it. So that was really helpful too. So all around, I just think, as far as like the whole package goes, this is one of the better ones we've watched in a while. So
Oh, dude, I totally agree. You know, let me jump to some anecdotes real quick, just because I want to kind of talk about the comparison to last week's movie, because I thought City Girl was a good movie too. And that had a 4.0 on Letterboxd and an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. This one had a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 3.3 on Letterboxd. In so many ways, I think this might be a superior film. I don't know what's your thoughts on that, just right away.
yeah, no, I was literally just thinking before you brought up Letterbox, like this movie makes me rethink my score for City Girl, right? Because we talked last week about City Girl being kind of in that 4 range, but this is the better movie to me. I thought that all around, like execution, the way it looked, the dialogue obviously enhances it for me. So I thought this was better than City Girl, so I'm kind of surprised to hear that.
You know, I think so often when you have just a simple story, this is just a simple story. There's nothing. This is just a movie about characters and people. And how do people, you know, either rise to the occasion or, you know, have fall to their human ways sometimes, right? And can
Mhm.
they overcome and redeem themselves, like we're going to discuss with these characters? Or do they continue on their, you know, their villainous ways and their stubborn pride and things of that nature? And a lot of those words are used in this film. So this is a simpler story to a certain extent. I mean, last week's story isn't that complicated either, but it's a simple
Right.
story. But that doesn't mean it can't be executed well. And I just think upon the writing, upon Robert, Leonard's choices of when the story should progress and the pieces of the puzzle that should be fit in. I just thought it was a superior story. So I was shocked that this was rated that much lower on Letterboxd than the other one. I have my reasons why I think I like this one so much better. And I'm just going to start with, if we can get to casting real quick. Norma Shear. She did win the Academy Award for Best Actress for this movie, and is the only Academy Award that she won. But she was nominated, Will, 6 times in 8 years. 6 times in 8 years. She's on a small, I think it's her, Louise Brooks, and Maria Falconetti to me. And Maria Falconetti and her performance, it sticks on its own, right? But Norma Shear carried this movie. I don't say carried because everybody did the roles well, but like she was as tall as, if not taller than every building in New York. She had that type of presence to her when she was on screen. Did you feel that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She was so clever. Everything she said, everything she did on screen, everything felt natural. Everything felt real. The way you can tell that she's also smart, right? It's not, often, the end of the by the end of the movie, we realize that she's got a really good job, right? I mean, it was probably a little bit obvious early, but she gets this incredible job offer for London. So she's obviously a smart person in the movie, but you can tell that she's also smart in real life too. Like she embodies the character. There's so many quotes that I wrote down from this movie. It's the first time I've done that, where I wrote down like 5 or 6 different quotes.
Good. I want you to hold on to those because, Will, I'm going to introduce a new segment to memorable quotes. Nice. I wrote down 6 of my own. That's so funny.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we're on the same page there because, sometimes, in a movie when there's a good writer that's writing the script or writing the dialogue, what you get is lines that feel forced and the actor just can't quite deliver them. Here, they just felt like she was thinking of them on the spot. It just felt like something that she would, like the line, especially when she's talking about balancing accounts. Like that's the one that I can remember immediately. I just thought it was perfect. And it just felt like on the spot. So yeah, no, you're exactly right. She was as tall as those buildings in New York.
Man, I would actually not argue, but like I would say that she, to me, feels like she is such the character that like she's not thinking it, right? So to your point of like the writing is so well done and she's educated that there is no kind of friction or no kind of miss and beat where we can tell that this is an actor portraying lines. Norma Shear is Jerry, and Jerry is Norma Shear. They're 2 in the one, and she is just been cheated on. And she is struggling because she's a strong, independent woman, but she's vulnerable in this moment, and she's having a hard time dealing with how to balance that moment. And you're right, dude. It was that line that made me go, okay, this is a new segment of the show because it was delivered well. The line, sometimes those types of lines can be thrown away if they're delivered the wrong way. They could be kind of corny. But when they're done the right way, that to me is what makes cinema, right? Like just the simple, like exactly what did she say? It was, I balanced our accounts. And I'm just like, oh my God, dude, it was so great. Just so great. I tend to think that sometimes when you get a great performance, like, Norma Shear, it can help carry a bad movie. Now, when you get a good movie and good writing and good actors, everybody around them, it can take a good movie to a great movie or, a great performance and make the movie great on top of it. So, yeah. So, to go along with that, I wanted to read something here that, let me see if I can find it real quick. Just because right here. So according to a film critic, Mick LaSalle, all right, in 1930, called her a feminist pioneer. Said that the exemplar of sophisticated modern womanhood in the first American film actress to make it chic and acceptable to be single, and not a virgin on screen. Like I said earlier, unapologetically her, and it sounds like she was that way in almost every film she did. Now, Will, I wanted to mention something to you. So I had mentioned to you in the 1929 draft of movies and just kind of where films were at in the state of films in 1929 about pre-code movies. It sounds like in 1934 when we get post-code and everybody's got to play by these new set of rules. She was, I don't want to say punished, but she had to change her style a little bit. So she goes from this kind of fearless, independent type of woman to a very noble, respectful, classy lady on screen after this. And she's able to pull off both. And I think that's a credit to Norma Shear, the actress. So just something to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was reading. There's a director here that I can't remember, so not great podcasting here. But I was reading about the pre-code, kind of getting close here to getting to that actual, post-code. So it'll be interesting to kind of track that over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is, so she was married to the MGM production head Irving Thalberg before he died in the middle 30s. I think they got married in 1927. So she was married to this man long before this movie was even being thought of. Here's an interesting note, especially coming from your husband, okay? MGM production head Irving Thalberg bought the rights to Ex-Wife, which is the name of the book, okay?
Right.
We talked about that last week's episode about adapting books to screenplays. But it says he bought the rights to the Ex-Wife in the summer of 1929. Thalberg, original's choice for the role of Jerry was Joan Crawford, which makes sense because we talk about her as one of the first ladies of Hollywood as well. Now, Norma Shear, Thalberg's wife, originally was not in the running for the lead role in The Divorcee because it was believed that she did not have enough sex appeal. Only after Shear arranged a special photo session with an independent portrait photographer, George Harlow, and Thalberg saw the result. Thalberg, her husband saw the results. Did he finally relent and give her the role? So,
wow.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, maybe not something you should admit. They don't think you. I find you super appealing, but I don't know what my underlings think.
Yeah. That's how that went down. It was. So that's the big ones that I have for this anecdotes for this movie. Will, let's talk about Chester Morris before we get to the plot. You said that you thought he did a very good job. I'm going to give you the table to kind of set the things that you liked about what Ted was bringing to the movie.
Yeah, no, it really just comes down to, sometimes there's the characters that you don't like because you're not supposed to, right? At least not early on. I think we get a little redemption by the end there. But he just does a good job of really thinking that he's in the right and thinking that his position is correct and thinking that it's okay for him to go out and, be promiscuous, but not for his wife to do so. So there's just a lot of that. He kind of makes it, he's playing dumb here. And I think it really kind of shines through because he's doing a good job with it. And then there's the scenes early on too, where, he doesn't feel like he's forcing all of his lines, which has been the issue with so many of the male characters that we've seen over the last couple of years, is everything just feels so wooden, and he doesn't. So it just feels like he's a real person too. So, I mean, he gets outshined a little bit, but I think that he does a pretty good job here.
Yeah. What I'll say is that he does get outshined, but what he does do is there's clear chemistry to me between the two of them. Mm-hmm. We have that early scene of them, by the tree, and they're, doing the thing that we've seen so much about the guy telling the girl how much he loves her and he wants to marry her. We've seen this in Our Dancing Daughters early on. I just, this is kind of how early days Hollywood tells us that two people are in love. They just overplay the scene.
Right.
But we quickly, when we get back to the big party that the doctor was throwing, there's there's big performances taking place here, and Ted is as big as a performance as any of them. You know, they're doing the Romeo and Juliet balcony scene on the stairs, and they're performing in front of their friends, and you know, there's chemistry there, and it feels organic. It feels, like, you know, yes, is it a performance taking place in front of a lot of people? Sure, but that doesn't mean that that's not how these people would, act in front of each other. And I did feel that Ted and Norma had a really, like a really solid love affair. Even so much that they let them, like, over and over again right after the wedding. When we jump ahead 3 years, for some reason I thought it stood out to me, and maybe it did to you, maybe it didn't. Just the amount of times that Robert Leonard lets them go back to kissing, and long kisses, and kisses that you can hear the sound of, right? Not the lean in and they're just, no one's puckering up and their faces are touching. These were real TV or movie kisses. And I think that matters too, to the reality of, or, the realness of the characters. So yeah, I'm with you. I think he did a really good job. He's just outshined by a better performance. So
yeah. No, I think that's right.
Where do you want to go next? Do we want to talk about themes, or do we want to talk about the plot?
I think the plot's pretty straightforward. I mean, if you wanted to touch on it just real quick, we can get it out of the way, and then we can kind of go to the themes if you wanted.
Well, I don't know if I have it real quick, but I like to give the plot of the movie to the fans, because we're not really doing the scene-by-scene breakdown anymore, but I'll do it as quick as I can.
Okay.
Here's basically the outline of the movie. Ted, Jerry, Paul, and Dorothy are part of the New York in crowd. Jerry's decision to marry Ted crushes Paul. He gets drunk and drives, causing an accident that leaves Dorothy's face disfigured. I spent so much of this movie wondering where this was going to come back into play, or if this was just like an early story that I was going to argue was kind of pointless for the overall totality of the movie. But it does come back, and it does have a point. So I again, used last week's word, which was complete. I think we're getting more complete movies going forward, which is good. Paul, he gets drunk, causing an accident, leaves Dorothy's face disfigured. Out of guilt, Paul marries Dorothy. Ted and Jerry have been married for 3 years, when on the evening of their 3rd anniversary, she discovers that he has had a brief affair with another woman. Ted tells Jerry it did not mean a thing. Upset, and with Ted away on a business trip, Jerry spends the night with his best friend, Don. Upon Ted's return, she tells him that she balanced their accounts, withholding Don's name. Now, right there, Will, I want to pause, okay? Let's break this down a little bit. So, relatively quickly, we get to this point in the movie. Wouldn't you say that? I mean, I know it's a short movie, but like right away, I think it was by the 4th or the 5th scene of the movie, Will, they're already married, and we're 3 years ahead in the future. Would you say that's the end of Act 1?
Yeah, I think so. Oh man, it's tough, because I think are we getting into the end of Act 1 once we find out about Janice? That's the only question I have. Like, is this scene the scene where we're getting into Act 2, right? What? Did I say the name wrong?
Is it Janice?
What? Yeah. The love affair.
Is it Janice or is it Janice?
Janice? Okay, sure.
I've never heard anybody call. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Okay. Aaron.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. I thought you, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Denise. Is Denise here?
Anyway, the lady he has an affair with, whose name starts with J.
Yeah, J.
That's kind of where I feel like the second scene, or the second act, is starting right there, because that's where all of the kind of tension starts to build. That's where we kind of get the peak of the first act, where we have a happy couple and a happy life, and then all of a sudden we're getting into the drama.
Okay, so if we go that route, then the movie actually ends relatively, I don't want to say quickly, but there's just not a lot of meat on the bones. I mean, we go from they're married at scene 5 to the big fight scene happens with them at scene 15. And then all of a sudden, if that's the end of Act 1, there's only 25 scenes in this movie. So from 16 to 25, we go through Act 2 and Act 3, which could very well be possible. I was just curious what your thoughts were on that. Looking at character motivations up to this point, do we feel like there's enough of context when we're talking about, we see this great love story. They're married 3 years. He's given her another, I think it was a wedding ring as a wedding anniversary gift. Would there be enough there? Is it just a simple enough that he was drunk and it was a one-time thing? Is that enough?
Doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like it, right? Because she's talking about Chicago. That's kind of where I'm at. I think he makes it seem like it doesn't mean anything, like it was a one-time thing, but I'm not sure if that's actually the case. She seems to know a lot more than he's letting on to Jerry.
Okay, that's fair, because those motivations work then for the characters, because she's using that as like, you keep saying that this means nothing, but like she wants it to mean something, like it's supposed to mean something, right? So okay, right. I'm on board with that. I'm on board. All right, we continue on then. Ted is outraged and they argue which ends with Ted leaving her and the couple filing for a divorce. I want to talk about arguments. I think some of my favorite, I really do. My favorite moments of cinema are when there's great contention between two perspectives, and like you said, both believing they're righteous, and you're left as an audience member left to kind of dissect and decipher what you believe is the right compelling argument. Not compelling, but like who's on the right side here. I wanted to what are some of your favorite, off the top of your head if you have them, just fight scenes from couples in movie history? Like, we just saw a great one with an Anatomy of a Fall between the husband and wife. And I just love because I am such a empath that I can see both sides in those moments. Hell, I've been on both sides of the arguments in those moments, right? So just what are some of the great argument scenes that you've seen in movie history?
I don't know why this is the first one that popped in my head, but Jason Segel and Sean from Bad Teacher, right? It's the only argument I need, Sean. That's the first one that popped in mind. For anyone who's a basketball fan, that's a great scene. But I mean, A Marriage Story a couple years ago with
that's a
Driver
good one.
and Scarlett Johansson. That there's so many scenes in that movie where, especially because there's the kid involved, it's just there's so much tension in those scenes, and it's hard. Who do you side with? I mean, when both art groups or both people have good points to make about the situation, it's hard to kind of navigate, and you feel for both people. So that's the other one that kind of comes to mind.
Revolutionary Road. You ever seen that one?
I have.
Now that one's a little bit more. There is a right side and a wrong side in that one, but there's still a great fight scene that takes place. I think you're right. A Marriage Story is great. That came to my mind as well, because when it's done well, I think you're supposed to leave there not necessarily chosen a side. You're supposed to be saddened by a great love story coming to an end, because yes, did Ted overstep and have his night? Absolutely. He's he doesn't get to be the victim here, although he does a pretty good job of turning it on its head and becoming the victim and trying his best to do that. I just the reason I like them so much, these fight scenes, is you can see these moments, right? So like, let's break down this fight scene in this movie if we can for a second. They get back from was it the wedding? He ruins the wedding and he's packing, and now Jerry comes in, and Jerry, the victim, is now, granted, she had her, she balanced the accounts like she says. Is she no longer a victim in that moment? Because, or are they both victims now? Because, like, what is the dynamic there? You know what I mean? Because she comes in begging for him back, begging for him to stay.
Yeah, well, the problem is they're coming at it from, it's almost like apples and oranges, because he doesn't even see his transgression as being wrong. Well, he sees it maybe as wrong, but he doesn't see it as a moral wrong. Whereas he can't see Jerry's as anything but. So he told her a little bit earlier, like the male sensibility, or the, you need to adopt the male train of thought here. I can't remember exactly what the phrasing was.
Male's perspective.
Yes, yeah. So
Yes.
as when she does, it's the thing in the room that that he can't get past is his pride, and she puts him on the spot about it. And like, pack your pride up with that, all your stuff there, Ted, is one of the things that she's kind of talking about. And that's the problem, is that she's willing to admit she made a mistake, but he's not. And that's where the whole thing unfolds, because he's not willing to see what he did as an error at all. And if he
Yeah.
is, he's not willing to admit it.
Yeah. I know I'm kind of all over the place in what we're doing, but I think this all applies to what we're doing right now. So
Yeah.
I wrote down memorable quotes, and the first quote, the first 5 quotes I have of the 6, they all can pertain to, well, there's one quote in here that I'll leave for later, another one. But anyways, early on in the movie, when they're sitting by the tree, you hear from Ted to Jerry, "You're different from all the other girls. You have a man's perspective," right? And he loves that about her.
Right.
She speaks what she wants. She's so clearly in her vision of the things that she wants. She knows exactly how to, to execute on the things that she wants. He's drawn to that freeness about her, like a man would be.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a couple other great quotes in this leading up to this scene, right? So
Yeah.
there's he gets back from Chicago and he's all giddy that he thinks forgiven him, right? All his transgressions are behind him now. And
Right.
she mentions to him how giddy he is. She says, "You're like a little boy that's stolen some jam. You've been spanked, kissed, and is happy again." I just love that line and the way that she delivered it. But then she tells the "I have balanced our accounts." But during the fight scene, Will, and this is what you were talking about, she backs away from him. And after realizing she's begging for this man, who now she's saying, "Look, I've done wrong. You've done wrong. Let's work on this marriage." And his being relentless to doing it, she now changes again. There's another dynamic shift, right?
Yeah.
Now she wants nothing to do with him, because she can't believe not only did he cheat on her, but now he won't even admit to the level of like what wrongdoing it is. So she goes on and says, "I thought your heart was breaking like mine, but sure enough, it's your male pride that you cannot bear." And God, man, I just when those lines are delivered the way that Norma Shear was delivering them, it just hit. It just hit.
Right.
I thought it was a great fight scene.
Yeah. Yep. And it's fascinating that up until this point, everything is so, like, what I mean is, up until this point in our journey, right? All of the movies that we've kind of been watching, it's been black and white, figuratively and literally. But figuratively, I mean, like, the movie has a point of view, and that's the point of view, and it carries you through the movie. And you can agree with it, you can disagree with it. Here, there's a point of view, but it's like, it's not trying to take a side. It's like, here's what's happening. This is why, this is the pain that they're feeling, but I'm not gonna lead you one way or the other. The director isn't willing to do that. He says, here's what's happening. And that's what's so fascinating, is the characters here are allowed to, and why it feels so real is that, sometimes when we get emotional, sometimes when we're mad, we can't see past that madness, even though we know that, like, we'd feel better if we could. And that's, what's happening to Ted right now. He's so mad that he messed up and has caused this, that he can't get past, like, the madness. He can't see clearly. So instead of slowing down and taking a breath, what he does is he screws everything up. And, it ends up costing him a few.
Yeah, sorry, you froze a little bit there. I just wanted to make sure you were back. No, you're back.
I mean,
Yeah, well said. I mean, it's blindness by rage, right? And in the rage, more times than not, is not at the person; it's at yourself. and it's
Right.
being projected out for, the things that you've done, and it's almost shame. It's guilt. It's all those things that come out that you are having a hard time grappling with, but it's all happening in real time. And you're supposed to make noise, right? You're supposed to
Yeah.
say something. And we don't have the bandwidth to process everything like that. And we also don't have a pause button. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, it's so human.
Mm-hmm.
It's so human, and it's love it, hate it, take it. It just is what it is. So,
Right.
um, what's the thing with male pride? Why more men than women do we have this trait where you forget the rage portion of it, but just the
Sure.
stubbornness to because I do think he's admitting his wrongdoing, right? But he's
Mm-hmm.
not communicating it to a way that she feels that he's actually sorry for what he's done, because he knows he's done something wrong. The male way is to admit it, but also to put pressure on you to make a decision and to come up with a solution to my transgression at my type of convenience, right?
Yeah.
Don't take time thinking about this. Don't drag this out longer than it should be. It needs to be now.
Yeah. Well, he's okay with the male perspective when it benefits him, but when it the whole male perspective comes through and it wrongs him is when the pride kicks in, right? I couldn't tell you why men fall victim to this more than women. I think it's clear that it does, but there's something in it has something to do with being right and doing the things you want, and when they don't go exactly how you plan them to go, or someone calls you out on your bullshit, like, it's hard to admit you were wrong. And I don't know what it is about men that have a harder time with it, but it's something I struggle with. I don't like being wrong, and when I am, I might know it, but I don't like to admit it. So
I
I think I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a male thing.
Yeah, to some extent, it's competitive, right? It's without us even knowing what we're being competitive about. It's this idea that we can't be wrong because we'd be on the side of losing in something, even though there's no competition here. But maybe there is, and we're just not aware of it, and that's how we look at it. So,
Life is
yeah,
competition. That's the
right.
problem.
You said it, my friend. We move on. We move on. Ted is outraged. They argue, which ends Ted leaving her couple filing for divorce. Now, while Jerry turns to the partying to forget her sorrows, Ted becomes an alcoholic. Paul and Jerry run into each other, and she discovers he still loves her and is willing to leave Dorothy, with whom he is in a loveless, resentful marriage to be with, and wants to be with Jerry. They spend 2 weeks together and plan for a future together. Dorothy comes to speak with Jerry at her home, but Paul is coincidentally meeting Jerry for dinner, and the three have an awkward exchange. Despite good arguments from Paul, Dorothy's desperation not to lose him forces Jerry to reevaluate her decision to leave with Paul. Ultimately, Jerry admits she regrets giving up on her first marriage. She decides to see if her husband will reconcile, disappointing Paul bitterly a second time in the movie. Weeks later, on her third attempt to locate Ted in Paris, Jerry finally finds him at a New Year's Eve party. After a polite exchange, Ted expresses his regret at how he reacted before the divorce. Jerry tells Ted her true feelings, and the two kiss at midnight to begin the new year and presumably their new lives together. So,
Yeah.
you have talked in the past, especially about Act Threes and whether or not
Mm.
they, really put a nice bow on a story, or if they've
Mhm.
kind of unraveled everything that was, being set up. Give your opinion on Act Three here, Will.
Yeah, no, the best part about this Act Three is that it stems from the first two acts. It follows from and makes logical sense, right? That's been my biggest issue with, probably the last 5 or 6 movies we've watched, is the Act Three always feels like that's the idea they had, and anything that came before it, like, they try their best to add up to the summary of the movie. And here, it feels the opposite. It feels like what happened was we watched the things happen, and then the conclusion is a sum of what's happened. So there, it doesn't feel like the carts before the horse here. That's the best part. The second best part is it's, maybe we don't get quite enough of Ted's middle or reasoning. Maybe we could have used another 2 minutes of Ted like explaining himself and really fully understanding the wrongs he made. But at the same time, like I think I think it still makes sense where they end up, um, even if I do want that 2 extra minutes.
I want the 2 extra minutes. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
say it now. So I do, right? And
yeah,
here's why. I'm Jim Carrey in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I can't remember if it was the very first word spoken or very soon in the movie. He says, "Why does every girl that looks my way do I already fall in love with?" Right? I'm kind of that way with these big, powerful female leads. Right?
mm,
I fall in love. I do. I'm sitting here and I'm like, I want the best for this woman. I want Norma Shear to have the world. Right? So what I need from this movie, I need from Ted is that thing that he failed to do in that argument scene, that thing he could not do because he was at blind rage. And we've all been there, and I'll give him his pass, right? I need him to have that in that moment. Jerry, I was wrong. What I did was wrong. I should have fought harder. No, you fought. You fought for us. I should have fought for us, just something that
yeah,
says, I'm drunk now. I'm an alcoholic now because I miss you so much, not because I haven't found another woman that lives up to the same as you. I'm an
hmm,
alcoholic now because of my guilt, my shame, right? I needed those extra 2 minutes, Will,
yeah,
for the movie to feel complete and me to be happy with their ultimate back togetherness, right?
yeah,
It doesn't. I think it will. It's a minor bump. It doesn't do. It doesn't kill the movie for me.
right,
I'm still happy for Norma, and I still believe that them coming back together isn't forced. I just needed. I need in order to feel good about it. I needed those
yeah,
2 minutes.
yeah. And I think that's where like we needed 2 minutes here, but maybe that's why I'm overlooking it a little bit. But we needed 2 minutes here, but we needed 32 minutes in the last three or four things we watched,
Oh,
because
sure.
it's so for here it's a little bit minor. But you're right. Like if we had those 2 to 5 minutes of Ted like seeing her there and being like, before you say anything, I need to say this, and then he goes on a spiel. I think that would have probably helped pay it off a little bit better.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would have went a long ways with the movie. Picking nits. I agree. Again, I don't want to pick too many nits here because again, I think the third act here is more flushed out and the motivations do align with our ending, right? And I do think that they're natural and they would have happened that way no matter which way the story was told. So I think the character motivations are perfectly fine. I think it's flushed out and fine. I just think the way we got there was a little bit weird. Her hanging out with this Ivan guy for a little bit because it fascinates her, but she really doesn't want to
Hmm.
pursue anything with him. That felt kind of weird. It ultimately it just leads to us getting the Paul, right?
Hmm.
And Paul back on this thing, and now Paul and her share 2 weeks away, and all this stuff, and ultimately gets us to Paul. I would have liked us to find, maybe she's on this train by herself, and Paul just happens to come in. I really didn't need her hanging out with this Ivan guy that much, but again, I think the point of it is, and they did a really awesome job, and maybe we should have talked about this, but like things I wanted to talk about after we get done with the plot is just like some really cool scenes and shots, camera shots in the movie. But like
Yeah.
the way they told the story of her dating
Mm.
was really
Yeah.
cool, right? It progressed the story. It's all we needed, all the hand holding, right? And
Yep.
then we get this extended date scene with Ivan. And then Paul comes to her rescue and ends up sending Ivan packing. So I thought that
Yeah.
was a little weird. Uh, maybe just because I didn't like the Ivan character, and maybe that's why. But like other than those things, I think Act 3 holds up, and I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. No, I think the Ivan really just comes down to like this is where she's ended up, right? This weird guy on a train who's, obsessed with her, and she's just not that into him. And she's having her fun, but I think it's supposed to show her as just kind of aloof. And this is the final straw, right? Where this is her subconsciously thinking, like, this is where I'm at. Like, this is what's happened to me. Like, sure, I've got this professional, success going on. I'm, traveling the country and going all over the place for my work, and that's going well. But this is where my love life has ended up. So I think that's kind of what they're going for there. But
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And it fits. It's just maybe it didn't work quite for me. Let's talk themes. Because in that scene with Ivan, she's grappling with what her ideas of love are, right?
yeah,
She's struggling. She had this youthful exuberance early in the movie. She believed in marriage and believed in love and that this is what it should be. And now she's kind of going down this just beaten woman, you know, route of settling and I have to continue living, so this is what society expects of me. Maybe this is what I expect of myself. I'm supposed to be doing these things. Maybe I'll destroy a marriage from Dorothy and go this route with Paul, and all these things that I think will lead to an ultimate happiness. And it's not until the end. So, like, obviously, themes of love. What other
hmm
themes are at play here?
um, there's I think love is the biggest one. But not just like being in love, but what can love overcome, I think, is what they're a little bit kind of shooting for. Like, if you really love someone, you got to work through the hard stuff. And I think it's a little messy if that's what the theme is, because there's the part of me that says, like, if you really love someone, you don't get into these situations in the first place. But, like, I think that's what they're really going for, is like, when you really love someone, if they are the person that you've chosen to be with, then it should be able to overcome, these tough situations. It should be able to transcend, the messy, earthly, bodily needs and desires that mess us up sometimes. And I sort of agree with that. For the most part, but again, I'm butting up against that. Like, if you truly love someone, could you even do that in the first place? And that's where I get stuck a little bit on that theme.
Well, let me see if I can kind of. I don't really know what I'm trying to do here with you, but let me just add to it a little bit if I can. So
Yeah.
what you were saying made me think of Denzel Washington's quote to Will Smith.
Mm,
Okay, which was, "At your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you." And if you are in a relationship that you have no reason to question, there's no doubts, right? You're truly in love, like you say. Maybe that's when temptation can show its head
mm,
because you're not looking for it, not expecting it, and then all of a sudden you're presented with it, and now you have no defenses set up to overcome it. Maybe that's
sure.
just the male's perspective. Maybe that's just bullshit. Maybe what I'm just saying is bullshit. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's something there to dive into. Um, but it made me think of, like, this old time practice of marriage, right? This traditional get in front of your family, your friends, but you're committing an act of love and you're repeating vows. And not everybody does it the same, especially these days. Everybody kind of picks and chooses what they want said. But it's supposed
Could
to
be in
be,
Chick-fil-A.
yeah, but during that time, it's supposed to be a promise to God, right? You're doing it in
Yeah.
a church. You're doing it, this cookie cutter type way of doing things. Um, you're supposed to be working on your marriage no matter what the situation is. Are there supposed to be non-negotiables when it comes to working on a marriage? And
No, but
I'm fully aware that I'm not married and you are, and I'm not trying to set you up here.
no,
I'm having a conversation.
I am in a traditional marriage. I'm married to my wife Molly, and we got married in a church. We didn't have any cookies or cutters, but we had some cake, and and
Yeah.
Hi, Joyce.
Good
Um,
night, Grandma.
Good night. Okay.
Anyways,
You good?
so sorry,
Yeah.
you're saying you are in a traditional marriage.
Yeah, no, I was saying traditional marriage, married to a woman. We're both straight. We're both, got married in front of God. Um, we didn't have any cookie cutters. We had cake at our wedding, but we we made a decision together, right? And we understand the terms of our love. And I'm not saying our terms work for everybody. I think the difference between 1930 and now is if you are in love with someone, you talk about the things that you like and need for yourself and what the other person likes and needs for themselves. At least, I think a lot more people do. And if you're getting into a marriage with someone, you understand the terms up front. So there is negotiations when you get, or at least there should be, so that you understand each other and you can live with each other successfully. Um, and hear a lot more about open marriages now. That's fine for other people. It's not something that would work for me. So it's mostly because I never liked anyone until I had met Molly. So um, the issue, right? But that's all I'm trying to say here is like, yes, I agree with you. I don't think there are any non-negotiables, but you do need to negotiate the terms before you actually, sign the dotted line. So
I want to just preface this by saying I don't think that I stated a statement. I asked a question. I'm not sure that I
no,
made a definitive
said
choice
something
there.
about cookie cutters, and I got a little hot. So
Yeah, does that term, is that a trigger for you? Is that I did not mean to trigger you with that term. I just meant
oh
like
man,
I just
it's
meant
because I
like
love chocolate chips, man.
going in front of the church. I did not mean that as a
No, no, no.
disrespectful term in any way. Uh, what was I going to say? Oh, I just meant when I was referring to non-negotiables, I meant is there non-negotiables in a marriage? And I got your perspective that if you're doing it right, everything's negotiable. That you should be presenting your desires, your needs, your wants on the
Yeah.
front end. If those things are not communicated the way that they should, and too
Mhm.
often, unfortunately, not every marriage is approaching the situation as mature as you and Molly seem to be doing it, and I applaud you guys for that. It doesn't mean that it doesn't come with strife. Doesn't mean that it doesn't come with, those are tough conversations that I'm sure you're going to have when somebody is feeling different than the norm of the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Or if somebody needs something a little bit more during that time. Because I once heard someone say that marriage is really never 50-50. It's, at times it's 70-30. This person's taking, this person's, giving. And then that shifts. There's a dynamic shift at that at certain times. So that's great. I guess I was just saying, so in this case, in this movie, The Divorcee, Ted
Yeah.
cheats.
Yep.
And is that a non-negotiable? Or is it based on relationship by relationship by relationship?
Yeah. No, I think the thing is she's willing to negotiate on it because she wants to stay in the marriage, and that's where they end up back at in the marriage. They end up back together. So I don't. The question for me is: are people allowed to make mistakes? Yes, but at the same time, what does that mean for the other person? Like, is it something that you can forgive somebody but not accept them back, right? You can forgive them for the mistake, but it doesn't mean you owe them anything after that point. So I if she's willing to bring him back into her life, though, there has to be some sort of change, right?
Right.
Because that's, I guess, maybe we're talking kind of, I'm talking around your question a little bit, but I think
I don't think you are. I don't think you are
you know
because there's not. I'm asking you a question, and it's prefaced with almost asking for a black and white answer, right? It just doesn't work that way. I was just curious your perspective on the movie, on someone who is married. What is your perspective on it? Because I would say that there's too many complexities for there to be a black and white answer, right? Is there a genuine, you know apology? Like, is someone genuinely remorseful for their actions? Are they aware that what they've done is now bigger than them, and now that they are coming from a humbled place, and that they aren't, nothing is owed. They're entitled to nothing from that moment forward, and anything that they're given, any grace. You know what I mean? So like, I'm on that, more of that train. So
Yeah. No,
but
I think at the end of the day, like if you really love someone, you can forgive them for bad things, but at the same time, it does have to come with something. Uh, it has to come with more than just like I've the one person forgiving. It has to come with the other person willing to make a change in their behavior. And I at first it doesn't seem like Ted can. He's kind of brushing it off his shoulder, and he's like, oh, it doesn't mean anything. And I think by the end he realizes that it meant a little bit of something here. So
yeah, and I kind of, when I was watching this, I use the word familiar because something that I've tried to be better than now in my 30s than I was in my 20s is this performative self, right? Which is very ego attached, and in the moment you don't realize it is. You think it's not, like. And I'll give you an example. There's moments in this movie when, especially after they both know, right? He's come back from Chicago and she's pretending to be happy. She's performing, right? And he's performing that all things are great in the world because she's performing for him, right? If you get to a place in your relationship, but that's where there's no honest conversation anymore, it's already failed, right? It's already failed. And you can come back from it, but you got to get to a place where you're not performing. And I was someone who performed quite a bit because... And I wasn't even sure why I was doing it. Maybe it was just a defense mechanism, a survival mechanism. This is how I survived to this certain point. Now I'm a little bit more aware of it, and I try not to do that. I'm very just blunt and honest about my things. I try to have a bedside manner to the approach of how I'm delivering it, but I'm not always perfect in that. But you asked 20-year-old Robert, I'm performing.
Yeah. Well, don't act like, you're the only one, right? I mean, this is one of the there's a book, I think it's called The Presentation of Self, Presentation of Self in Life or something like that, written by Irving Goffman. In the 50s, he was a sociologist, psychologist, and he essentially just said, like, we have as many selves as situations we find ourselves in. Because, we put on a self for our parents, we put on a self for our spouse, we put on a self for our group of friends, our multiple groups of friends, because we are adaptable. We fit into and create ourselves as we go with those groups, with those people. And one great debate I used to get into, one of my friends from grad school, was we always argued, is the idea to be able to have as many selves as possible, or to make oneself for have one self that you can present to every group? Like, is that what we should all be trying to do? Like, just be one self for everyone? Or should we be kind of able to adapt that self to multiple groups, right? So it's one of those kind of just fun things.
I like the question. Just to give my 2 cents on it, I think the one whatever, the idea of the one sounds great. The idea of being oneself wherever we go, but it's also unrealistic because somebody's oneself, like my father's oneself, might be completely different from my oneself. And is there any type of room for us to get along if he is truly his self and I'm truly myself? But if we can kind of both meet in the middle, there's a relationship that can happen there. And then you do that type of code switching with all of your groups that you're in, because it's how you survive. It's what we do, to conform, as long as we're willing to concede on certain conformities. I don't know, getting a little bit away from the show, but I think you're right. I think the idea of having selves in every different situation is what we do to survive. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So that's the Divorcee. Anything you want to add? I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the cool camera shots, unless you wanted to talk a little bit more about the plot.
Nope, go ahead.
A couple things I thought were really well done. Early on, Paul's drunk driving, we begin to see a first person point of view of the car swerving in and out of the traffic. I thought we got a really good feeling that he's speeding and out of control, all while maintaining camera focus. Like, that was really well done, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I even started to feel like a little bit nauseous
Yeah.
about 20 seconds in. Yeah, I was already kind of like, okay, I don't know how much more of this I could take. So
Yeah,
it
I
was
felt
good.
like he did a good job without, sometimes you can tell that they're miniatures they're being used. They're like it's they were going really slow, but the camera speed, they maybe sped up the projector
Right.
or whatnot to get that effect. I thought this was really well done. Couple notes on hands. So early on, we get the wedding, just seeing the hands and the priest in the background, hearing the voices repeating what the priest is saying, and then the transition to Paul and Dorothy doing the same thing, just seeing the hands, and then they're getting married in the bed at the hospital. But we get the same type of trick done when Jerry starts going on multiple dates. We hear her talking with these guys, on but we're only seeing them playing with the hands. One of the
Mm-hmm.
quotes I wrote down was, she goes, I don't understand French, but I know the symptoms of high blood pressure in any language. Like,
So good.
so good, man. So
Yeah,
good. I thought that
that was
was,
very good.
I just think, when you can see things like that, you got a director who cares, right? How can we tell this story differently? How can I speed this up? I just thought he packed a punch here. And then the last shot I thought was worth noting. We don't have to spend too much on it, but it's just
Sure.
Jerry and Don. We haven't even talked about Don really.
Mm.
But like, Don was the best friend. And
Yeah.
all of Act 2 is every character in this movie outside of Paul, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can almost argue Paul is doing what is running away, even though he married her,
Mm-hmm.
is running away from life.
Mm-hmm.
Ted is an alcoholic. Jerry is trying to sleep with anything and everyone to fill a void of love. At least that's what we think she's doing, right? Don has literally physically moved. He refuses to stay put because he can't face his best friend. And then you can argue whether or not Paul, ran away by staying in. So, yeah, I just, do we want to touch on that real quick? Just that theme?
I think you said it. I think you said it. I
Okay.
don't have much to add to it, but
Well, I just thought that the scene I thought was good with the camera shot was when they get to the club after they leave her house because she can't stand to be there anymore. Don's drunk and
yeah.
he's taking her out of the situation. But there's just that dolly shot at the club
Oh yeah.
where it kind of zooms in real quick, and then they see the kind of like a look shared between them.
Yeah.
And then we get that takes us to her at his apartment and the blinds being closed and we know what happens. So
Right.
I just thought those 4 camera shots really, separated
Yeah.
him as a director from a lot of the other directors that we've seen so far. So
Yeah, and this movie also was kind of sneaky funny. Just a lot of funny dialogue, a lot of funny scenes. Don walking around like the ape when the organ, the thing that he's carrying around playing the music, he was kind of walking around like an ape. I thought that was kind of clever. The one scene that I also thought was kind of funny was the transition from when Dorothy, is in the car accident, and it transitions right into the marriage in the church, and I swear I could have swore it was the funeral. I was like, oh, I guess she didn't make it.
yeah, I thought it was the
So
funeral too. Yeah.
yeah, just some funny, I think intentionally funny scene switching going there, where and also some allusion to marriage kind of being like a funeral. I thought that was kind of clever too. But
I'm pretty sure the first shot of that church, there's a coffin up there. I could be
it
wrong,
looks for
but
sure.
Robert Leonard definitely knew what he was doing there. No,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I thought that was really funny. It
The
was
other
funny.
really-
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
There was just a really funny part too. She's just really a great actress. There was the part where he gets home from Chicago and he says, "I'm going to make love to you until you can't scream anymore," I can't. How does he say? I'm gonna
I
make love
have
to
it.
you until you scream, or
I,
until you stop screaming. There you go.
dude, I have it. Memorable quotes. I'd like to make love to you while you scream for help.
Yeah, and then she goes, can't scream. Just
Dude,
there is a lot of good stuff here, man.
a lot of good stuff. I thought I think it was Hannah, the maid. She's on the boat.
Mm.
She's clearly judging every character in the movie, but
Oh,
someone says she walks up and she sees her with Paul. It's like she knows what what Jerry should be doing the whole time, but she never conveys the message. And
right.
Norma or Jerry says, "Isn't this just heaven?" And Hannah says, "Well, I don't hear any angels playing, but we all got to keep moving forward," or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So
No,
no,
big picture. Yeah, big picture for the like the project here is I'm just interested to track. We've had a lot of like high society films over the last
yeah.
few years that we've watched, and I'm just kind of curious to see like if some of the stuff we start to watch critiques it a little bit more because it's kind of right now it's kind of sitting pretty up on its pedestal, and we've got the Great Depression happening now, and a lot of money being lost. So just curious to see if we're going to start seeing some of these better films that we end up watching from each year start to critique a little bit more those
Yeah,
structures.
I think that's fair. And I also think that, we didn't hear of any type of hard struggles yet in this movie. And a lot of that could be because it was made in 1929 and
Hmm.
parts of it 1928. So it's like, we're just not quite there with, we're always a year or two behind when these movies get released
Right.
because of when they were producing them. So I think 31, 32, definitely by 33 and on, I think we got to be hearing and seeing some stories of the Great Depression. So,
I think so.
yeah. So that was the Divorcee. I'm calling that one a sneaky one, man, because that's on my list now. This is one I'm going to remember, and I'm just curious how when we do our Oscars at the end of the 1930s here, how we're going to compare this one compared to some of the other ones. So because we've got a big war epic coming up that we know
Yeah.
has stood the test of time in a lot of people's eyes. So let's
Yeah.
ask the big questions.
All right.
I think we both agree that this movie should have been drafted. Is this movie a rewatchable for you, Will? Just as a
That's a good
personal
question.
one, or I
Yeah.
would watch this movie again.
I honestly I think this movie would be worth showing to someone, right? Like if Molly were to say, "Hey, what is a good movie that you've watched? Let's watch it together." Like this might be one of the ones I pick.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's definitely rewatchable.
No, I totally agree. Like this is a great date night movie.
Mhm.
I don't think you're gonna sit down and be like, "Hey, Molly, let's watch this masterpiece, Passion of Joan of Arc. Sit through this torture scene." Um,
Right.
but yeah, this is fun. This is a fun movie. There's a little bit of things in there. I mean, it's fun. The topic is heavy, but the performance is so great. The story doesn't lack. So yeah, I'm with you. Is it a masterpiece?
Probably not. It got pretty close. There's some scenes here that are, on that line that if there was just a couple other things, it would have got pushed over, but not quite.
The movie is not a masterpiece to me. I think Norma Shear, this is the best performance I've seen outside of Maria Falconetti. And the only reason I give Maria Falconetti is because she has to do so much more with that movie. There's no talking. It's a silent film. It's all facial. She's a theater actress. I know we're probably, I'm going to be riding that wave for a while with her,
Yeah.
only because, Norma's being asked to play, it's a simple story, but she's got to bring emotion to it in order to carry it and make it matter. This is the second best performance I've seen, in my opinion, from an actress, going forward so far. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it, buddy. That's what I got for this film.
Oh man, no hard hitting questions.
No, but I wanted to hear if you had any, or if you to tell me the rest of your quotes. What else did you write down? Did I write down the same ones, or?
Oh, I think we got to everything. The last one I really had there was the can't scream. Not a super great or memorable quote, just absolutely hilarious. The one hard hitting question I did have is why didn't this movie end with them walking like down in Paris with him stump for a right arm? That was my question. He wanted to give that right arm pretty quick, so I wanted him to prove it.
because that would have been for an audience of one. That would have been for Will and Will only. I think actually on the DVD in 2008 when it was re-released, there's an
Yeah.
alternative ending. You can find it out there. That's just for you.
Awesome. It's just the arm of his suit folded up and pinned to his shoulder.
Yeah, see, we're just looking for him to put a little, put a stake in the game a little bit. Put your arm in the game. Yeah, I'm with you. I have nothing but good things to say to this. What would you rate it in your way too early rating? I know usually we like to take some time before we actually put it down, but what would your rating be on this?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this a little bit off camera. Like, this is better than City Girl, and I gave City Girl 4. So I feel like I have to go to at least a 4.5 with this, and I think it's justified, just because front to back, with performances, with the story, it all adds up to something pretty special. So I think 4.5 is the spot.
Yeah, I would actually agree with you on this one. I tend to move City Girl down to 3.5 for me. I'm not even sure why. And maybe it's unfair. But maybe it's just because we watched that one last, and this is the next one. And now you're right. I found myself judging the last film based on this film, and I'm not sure that that's fair to do. But I did land on a 3.5 with City Girl, and I think 4.5 feels right in the right spot for this one. I really enjoyed this. I was just shocked at 3.3 for on Letterboxd with everybody else. So coming up next, though, we've got a big one.
Mm-hmm.
All Quiet. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I thought you were pausing for me. Go ahead.
No, I will pause if you want. If you want to deliver it, so go ahead.
Oh no, yeah. So All Quiet on the Western Front. I don't have all the stuff in front of me. So if you've got that, go for it. But like the director and directed. Oh, I found it. Louis Milestone. This won Best Picture in 1931. Because it was a year after, is that right?
Yeah, the way they do that, yeah.
Yeah, it's still in that weird period, folks, where if you've been paying attention at all, like we got half a year. They haven't set it for the calendar year yet, so I wasn't quite sure. But 1931, I've seen the most recent remake, the one that was made in German, and in Germany, I watched that when it came out a couple years ago and really thought it was great, so I'm excited to see kind of where it stems from, so to speak.
Yeah, and like I said, I've seen this movie, and again, it was wow, what am I, 37 now? It was almost 20 years ago, probably closer to 18. I was in a film literature and movie class. They showed this one, and the tagline is: a German youth eagerly enters World War I, but his enthusiasm wanes as he gets a firsthand view of the horror. If you're looking for subplots and, Jack and Rose on the Titanic type sub story, that ain't gonna happen in this movie. You're gonna get a firsthand experience of what war is like. The goods as far as like the brotherhoods, the camaraderie, things like that. Cause there is that exists. And then the bads, and there's way more bads than there are goods. So it's, I don't remember a lot of it. I'm excited to jump back into it with you. And, cause this is 7 wins and 2 nominations when it came to the Oscars. So this is going to be one of those 2-hour. It's going to be our longest movie that we've watched to this point, 2.5 hours long. So grab your popcorn and settle up, because it's going to be a ride.
Yeah. Nope. Be excited. Guys, set a little bit more time aside this week, but
yep. So for the rest of you, follow us. You know what to do. You guys can, right there at the bottom of the screen, if you're watching us on YouTube and on Spotify, we say it at the beginning, but you know where you can find us. And Will and I just really appreciate everybody in the journey. We just hit 600 followers on Instagram. That's pretty cool. We're up to 22 followers on Spotify. So however you're listening, we just appreciate it, and we appreciate all the feedback. So keep watching movies, everybody.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see you.